Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Metaphysical Mindset. My name is Elisha Mancini Caster. I will be your host today, and joining us is our co-host, Scott Nash. Hi, Scott.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, thanks.
Good. Okay, so the topic for today is we are going to talk about the darkness that is happening in the world right now and how and why we need to hold space for compassion. So we'll talk a little bit about those topics along with some other topics like where the saying as above, so below came from. That was new information for me, although I've been saying it for a long time. But we'll kind of talk about that and then the healing process that's happening in our planet and inside of us, that's happening with each of us individually. And then we'll talk a little bit more about what we can do to support this process. Okay, so I will start off with as above, so below, because I found when I was thinking about this topic, that was one of the first things that popped into my mind. Because when thinking about why is all this darkness happening in our world, I had to kind of reflect on the darkness or the healing, I guess I would say, that is happening within me and within people around me. So I did not know that that saying came from the Emerald Tablets and that Isaac Newton's translation of that phrase is really how it became so popular.
Oh, I didn't know that either. I didn't know that it was Isaac Newton that translated it.
Well, I know that you were saying it's Hermes Trismegistus that first interpreted the Emerald Tablets or created the Emerald Tablets. What is that?
I think created it, yeah.
So, and then I was reading a little bit about that. And so Hermes has a lot of different, there's a lot of different ideas or thoughts about who Hermes actually was. Some people say Thoth from ancient Egypt is Hermes. What do you know about that?
Well, I know Trismegistus means thrice great. So he must have been pretty good because they're calling him Hermes the 3 times great. So he must have been pretty smart and had pretty pretty intelligent opinions about things for people to come up with a name like that for him. But I also know like the Kabbalion, which is written by the 3 initiates who are just unnamed people, are actually talking about the principles of Hermes Trismegistus, which is basically the philosophy of that metaphysics believe. The principles of vibration and opposites are actually the same, and all these other topics.
Interesting.
So it's really, yeah, it really is interesting.
And so, as above, so below, when you think of that phrase, what do you think of?
See, that's the thing. Like, I don't know. I always have a hard time trying to figure out how to interpret it and how I see it and what it means to me. But you were saying some things earlier today or the other day that I was thinking, wow, that's really a smart way to look at it too. When you were talking about what we're talking about today, like the condition of the darkness in the world and why it's there and all these things. I mean, I've kind of thought of it always as the way things are here is the same way things are in other dimensions, in spirit, in heaven, if you want to call it that, right? That things have a likeness. And like in magic terminology, it would be basically like in the astral plane, things get created there first, right? Before they become manifest here. So it's like something up above and then it becomes something down below here, right? Like we focus our intention in this other dimension on creating something, and then that causes the creation to happen here. So that's like the one way I thought of it. But the way that you were mentioning it about like and it does apply this way too. There's a lot of ways to think about it. That's why it's so interesting. But like the horrible experiences that mankind has been through throughout the centuries, right? Wars and all these things have added this energy into the collective conscious that we all actually feel the results of that, right? It affects all of us. And so we're all actually get an impact from that. And so in that way, it's kind of like, up above this greater condition of where all this energy is filtering down below to all of us individually where we're dealing with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's interesting, to think about that suffering that is happening and that has happened globally, individually. However, generations and lifetimes of this, and it does kind of feel like a conditioning, because we see people still reacting and responding from the suffering that they experienced or that their ancestors have experienced. And here we are living through it. So I guess to add on to what we were talking about earlier, why is all this darkness happening on our planet? Why are we at war? Why are there people suffering in places and starving and having, dictators rule over them and really creating such a helpless life experience for people? And I have to say, as a whole, if we are working towards unity consciousness and we are all connected, there has to be still the suffering that's in the cells of our being that we haven't processed fully. And so we're still projecting that experience out into the world. And we're really creating events that continue to happen that are asking us to heal what is within. Because I was thinking about what happens to us individually. We have these experiences from our childhood. Anyone that's done, childhood healing trauma work can really relate easily to this idea, this concept that here we have this experience that we had maybe when we were younger, and we didn't have the resources or the tools to heal from that experience. So we carry that pain with us inside of us. And then at some point I always think it's through manifesting. It's through this idea that we want to experience something or we want to manifest something into our lives, that these hidden pains start to kind of consciousness. I feel like there's like the subconscious, and then there's the conscious, and then there's always this feeling of when we're trying to manifest something, we are kind of clearing out the blocks in our body that is stopping us from having that. And they kind of start to poke their head through our consciousness. And we start to kind of remember the experience of them. And we'll have the memory of something that happened to us when we're younger, and then we'll kind of forget about it. And it's just like a blip. Sometimes we don't even realize we're thinking it. And then all of a sudden, it kind of starts to creep up in our consciousness more and more. The more this manifestation wants to come into fruition, it's creeping into that conscious thought. And then we start to become aware of it. And all of a sudden, it's like, wow, I keep having this. It becomes so common, we verbalize it. I keep having this memory of growing up and this experience that happened to me. And I forgot all about it. I haven't thought about it in 20 years. And all of a sudden it's in my mind, and everywhere I look, I'm starting to see it. If we don't deal with it in that moment, because that's an opportunity, I feel like what happens is we start to try to stuff that back down, and it's hard. It becomes even harder. And then it blocks the creation of the manifestation we were trying to have. And then we become even more diligent in our will to not change. And I feel like the experience that we go through individually is kind of what is happening globally and why all these catastrophes keep happening.
Well, we do know that, they always say history repeats itself. And we do know when we don't deal with an issue, it keeps coming back around and around and around again. It seems like there are things that we need to look at and face individually, events that have happened, and try to come to some kind of resolution that we can, move past it and not keep it back just hidden and not thought about. With like big events that have happened in the past. I was watching, I don't know why this was, but I saw it was something about war, something about Vietnam or something. And it was, these guys, what they went through over there, napalm and, you know, and horrible just war, gunfights, losing limbs, bombs exploding everywhere, going down in tunnels under the ground to try to chase other guys out. I mean, we can't even barely imagine what that would have been like. Right? I mean, and I mean, and that's me. And I've been around, in 1969, and I can barely even think about it or don't really know very much about it. How much do the younger generation know about any of that or ever think about, that kind of stuff? And then there was the draft. That's what it was about. It was about, somebody had, the thing I saw was something about somebody who got drafted and then ended up getting killed. But even as a kid growing up, I was thinking, I hope I don't get drafted into a war. And then I ended up going in the military anyways on my own. But but still, the fear of being drafted to go to war was a horrible fear. And all the horrible things that happened over there that caused people to have drug addiction and all these things just to try to escape all those horrors, just to be able to survive in life. I mean, it's tough stuff. And I think, that energy is out there in the universe, and then it's come back around with Afghanistan and all these things that all these other young people have gone to fight. And I really respect everyone who's served our country and in a lot of other countries too, and I don't, because I don't know that in every case that we're always on the exact right side for the exact right reasons. That's the hard part. So it just is a horrible situation for all the people involved that have to be involved in doing all this stuff and, and facing all this stuff.
Sure.
But it also kind of brings me around to if these events that have happened and caused all this pain and suffering and pushed it into people's minds and hate and anger and all these anguish and everything else into the collective conscious energy. I mean, I think a lot of people will look at things and go, well, what am I going to do about this one event? Or how am I going to stop a war going on over here? Or how am I, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's too big to deal with things like that. So I think we just have a tendency to just say, well, I'll just shove that and stick it down back where I put everything else that I don't want to think about or deal with, because there's nothing that I can do about it. The best solution that I can come up with right now is that individually we need to look at it and try to heal those events, at least for ourselves. Because when enough of us do that, then the collective conscious can change. And as more and more people keep doing that, right, it will heal. And we only really have control of ourselves. So the only thing that we can really control is our own emotions and thoughts about those things. And, as you get older, it becomes easier. I feel it becomes easier to deal with things because, you look at young kids and you see how their emotions run so high about everything. And, they're so invested in everything going on and peer pressure and all these different things. When you get older, those kind of things kind of fade away a bit and it's easier just to take things as they come and deal with it, you know, from a perspective of wisdom and, you know, knowing it's not every little thing that happens is the end of the world. And, you know, it's okay to look at it. But it also brings apart one other thought that I was having.
Sure.
There are some people that believe that there is no like evil dark forces. Okay. Like everything is good. There's only the side that's good in the world. Now, I don't personally believe that, but believing that is not a bad thing because it puts your mind into a spot where you're creating only good and you can only, you know, everything is good. So it kind of takes your mind away from feeding energy into darkness and evil by thinking about it all the time and giving it power.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting thought. I don't know, when people are saying that there is no darkness or evil in the world, I don't know if they're saying, I don't know where they're coming from. What I've learned from some people that I know that have thought that or said that in my presence is that they view what is happening as evil as necessary. So it's hard to get into that frame of mind, but I can kind of understand where they're coming from. And they've been really highly evolved people that have said this, that I've considered what they're saying. That's why I guess I've considered what they're saying to be true, because I guess we can kind of understand if we even just with the topic of why is all the darkness happening in the world right now, it's to bring out, if we view it as to bring out the healing that we need to have as a culture of people so that we can continue to ascend into the next level of our potential, the next dimension of our potential, then I can see how it's not evil. But it is difficult to hold that perspective sometimes, especially if you've had loved ones that even if you look at people that have died in hurricanes, like some people have lost their whole families to a hurricane. I mean, how helpless, how Mother Nature turned on you and you had this whole entire part of your family wiped out. That is horrific. It's hard to think that that was supposed to happen and living with all of that pain. But as a culture, when we get into that higher perspective, we start to kind of see how that darkness will bring out a healing that is necessary for us in relationship to how we treat our planet.
For sure, that's true. I mean, I believe that 100%. Like everything is necessary the way that things happen. The difficult part is, I think, keeping that in mind and still balancing your empathy and compassion for people that are going through some of these, you know, like the things that some people have to deal with just seem horrific to me, right? Like totally horrific. And I don't want to get to a point where I just am like, oh, that's just the way it is. It's for the greater good. You still want to have that compassion, you know, in that caring. But I mean, everything, I mean, we both agree everything happens for a reason. And there's reasons behind all these things. But there's, I guess by evil, I'm talking more about like, in my opinion, if there are like dark spirits or things like that that can affect, right, you on this physical plane. Now, I've never had anything like that happen to me, right? And I feel like I'm protected from anything like that. But I've seen so many shows and things where it just seems like that has to, some of that stuff has to be really happening. Now, maybe it's our interpretation of what's happening turn it into something that it's not, it's happening in a different way. I don't know. But it just seems like there's something there. But at the same
Yeah.
time, I personally don't want to give that energy any power.
Right. Right. That is definitely a tough topic. You know, I mean, well, I'm trying to think of an example. Do you have an example you want to share? Do you want to share an example?
Like some reality TV show stuff where they'll say, oh, people here were worshiping the devil and making sacrifices and stuff. And now when people come in this house, they get sick, or,
Oh,
they have a mental issue afterwards for a while, or they go totally crazy and have to be, you know what I mean? Like I've seen some shows like that. Hell
yeah.
House, the show Hell House.
Yeah.
I believe that there is, and it's, maybe it's not, I guess I would just say there is negative energy, and negative energy can be built up just like positive energy can be,
Yes, for sure.
and what you put your intention into,
I
you
mean, we
can
know
cause
that just
change.
we know that from looking at cults that have developed all around the world, but plenty in the United States that have developed. And there are documentaries being done about cults now, trying to bring that, people are trying to bring that awareness out. But yes, I believe I it's hard for me to really look at negative spirits and give that any attention. Um, so I don't.
I don't
Yeah.
either. I don't ever focus on anything like that. I just don't have
Yeah.
any use for it. It's not part of what I want my life to be.
Yeah. So, but in regard to people, I would be more worried about that. And just cults forming and people that come together and form belief systems that encourage them to do negative things to people and really find a way to justify their actions and behaviors. That to me, and I would say that I'm not saying that war comes from those developments, but I think we know sometimes that we've gone to war for what we thought was the reason, and then later we find out it's another reason. And so it definitely feels like some of that negative.
Right.
uh,
Manipulation. It's a manipulation of the population.
to use our tax dollars to go to war for something that if we knew the truth behind it in the first place, we would have fought.
Right. The people would have said, no, we're not doing it. And then that would have been the end of it.
Yeah. Which I think it's great to notice this stuff. This is why I do like to pay attention to things that are going on in the world. I know a lot of spiritual people say, I don't watch the news. I don't pay attention to anything that's going on in the world. And that's what is good for me. But I also believe, and I'm not saying that everyone should do that or not do that, but I know that I go through spurts where I have to watch, not the news necessarily, but I do need to kind of know events that are happening because I feel like I need the awareness of it so that I can support my own healing, not to contribute to it. And I guess that's what we're talking about tonight.
Right. I mean, I'm in that boat right now where I really haven't watched any news or anything in probably 6 months. I mean, very occasionally I might go like on a website to look at some news where I can just control it for a minute there. I've never watched it on TV ever, but I
Yeah.
might go just to see what's happening in the world. And sometimes I'm surprised at what's going on, but mostly it's the same stuff that's been going on before the 6 months. I mean, it's just a lot of confrontation and argument. And I mean, that's what we probably need to heal mostly is the arguing amongst ourselves. If we can get over that part, I mean, that would heal a lot of what's going on. Like, I don't think there are that many, if you look at percentage wise, extremists on either side of any issue. Okay, like there are extremists that are like, okay, this is my agenda, and then there's people that are extreme on the other end going, this is mine. But in the middle, there's a middle ground of the population who can agree on just about everything. You know, they could come to a agreement and agree on everything and be like, yes, that's okay.
What I do know about the spiritual path and lessons that help us to ascend into being able to hold fourth and fifth density energies is that we do need to have, we do need to be able to have multiple perspectives. I know Rudolf Steiner talks about the 12 perspectives. So we need to be able to look at any topic. And I've done this with so many topics, and I'm so grateful. I'm learning to expand out on that, although I struggle, like I'm sure a lot of people, to have all of those perspectives. But that is the goal. So sometimes when I look at our society as being on one side or the other, I don't know if it's purposeful, because we do become less independent of thought and more easy to program as a culture into our, our education system, our healthcare system, all of these systems that require this programming to continue to have society as workers' society and not fingers society. So I do wonder sometimes too how much of an agenda there is, just because whenever we're choosing one side or the other, you've said that for years, Scott, we can never choose sides, because as soon as we do, we take away the ability to consider all of these other perspectives and ways of being, which I think also takes away our ability to, like, kind of just what we're talking about. We have all of these experiences that are so unique to who we are, that decide for us how we view things and how we do things. When someone is encouraging, or there is a programming being, propaganda is legal, and that all happened with the Obama administration, whether right or wrong, or I'm not saying I'm either or Republican or Democrat, but I'm just saying that is all legal now. And so we are programmable. And whenever you're picking one side or the other and refusing to see the other side, you're limiting your perspective, and you are lessening your spiritual growth. I truly believe that.
Because you really are limiting. I mean, it applies in so many different ways. Like, when somebody goes, oh, you haven't walked a mile in their shoes. I mean, that's true, because you have no idea what somebody's been through and why they may have made a decision that you might say, I would never have made that decision. But hell, you don't know. You don't know that for sure. You very well might have made the same decision that they did, based on what had happened in your life and what you've gone through and what kind of mental issues you may have been exposed to, or that were created for you, or whatever, right?
Absolutely. One of my first channeling experiences happened like sporadically. I had no idea. And I sat there after what I said, and I thought, I knew I didn't say it. And then I had to deal with the reality of what came through me, and it broke me. It was someone was telling me this story, and I was thinking, at the beginning of her telling me the story, I was thinking, oh my gosh, I was judging her. I was very young. I was judging her. I was thinking, oh my gosh, this is terrible. And then out of my mouth, somewhere I had this opening of trying to receive what she was saying and not judge her. And then out of my mouth came, well, if I were you, I would have done the same exact thing, considering everything you went through. And I sat there, and she went to the bathroom, and I just sat there like, oh my gosh, I do need to consider what I just said, because I didn't know where. Later on, I thought, I think I channeled that, and it made me think. And it really kind of broke me wide open into the possibility that I've never had to hurt someone to feed my family. So I can say, I would never hurt someone to feed my family, or I would never steal something to feed my family. But if my family was starving, I don't know. I can't judge someone that did that
For sure.
because I don't know what that's like. So I think that was an opening for me to start to consider that. And I think you're right. As you get older, it starts to kind of get easier to manage your emotions and your thoughts and your judgments.
It can, I guess, depending on if you are willing to go that way. If you're willing to mature in that way, because there are people that are 70, 80 years old that are still as stubborn and think the same way, as they thought when they were 20. But I mean, for me, it seems like it's become easier.
Yes, there are definitely people that are going to be anti gun, anti abortion, anti whatever, anti, and that they're going to hold that belief. But, there's something inside of them. There's been opportunities for them to do healing work,
Right.
and they're choosing not to. And maybe not. Maybe some people have done healing work and that belief isn't necessary for them to transcend or to pass over. It's a really difficult thing, but I can honestly say I can look at that is my goal. Whenever I look at something and I say I should do it this way, I do recognize that I would do it that way, but they wouldn't do it that way. And I think I struggle with that in everyday life sometimes. Just thinking someone close to me should do something like this or you should do that. And then I have to think, well, it's their life path. They came here to have these experiences. All their experiences have led them to choose this path. Why on earth would I think I would know it's best?
That's a hard place for some people to ever get to be at that point of the way of thinking.
Oh my
Like,
gosh.
me, like, I don't want anybody telling me how to do anything. Like, I'm just stubborn like that. I don't know why. That's just the way I am. But, right. Like, don't tell me, I'll do it my own way. Even if it's the sucky way. But I'll take advice if it's there for sure.
Well, there's something beautiful in holding that space though. And I think in our society right now, the theme of choose a side is saying, well, you've only got two choices then. How are we going to get to 12 perspectives? And this spiritual awakening, if we're just choosing between two and we're only taking one. And maybe within that choice to take the one side, you might have a couple little choices within there or perspectives in there to then hold. So then even if you're just holding three, you have to be able to see the other side. This brings me to think of a friend of mine who has, so she is mixed. She has a white father and a black mother. And she talks about this presence in her life. She's got one side of her family that was involved in the KKK and another side of her family that was obviously dealing with, there's a history there of slavery that she knows of. And this is living inside of her. She's got this constant going back and forth of being able to, how amazing of an opportunity. Well, luckily for her, that became an opportunity to help other people. And that's what she does. But isn't that amazing?
It is. I mean, that kind of reminds me of, some good things coming out of terrible things, like Schindler's List. Like that movie, for whatever reason, that's like one of my favorite movies. I mean, it's horrible what happens in it, but just the redemption of man that's depicted there and that happened is just incredible to me. Like it really affects my emotions every single time I see it, At the end when he saved all those Jews,
Oh my God.
and then he still feels horrible that he didn't, give up his watch or whatever and save more people. Like that's incredibly powerful. And that's a horrible thing, but that story, I mean, think how many people that's reached in the world to see that and be able to experience that kind of energy and the thought of that redemption. and doing the right thing. And I mean, it really blossoms into something really beautiful there, which I'm
Yeah.
sure to the end of his days, he probably held himself as a bad person and regretted not doing more, you know. But from the outside, people looking at him are like, wow, you did great. I mean, it's really incredible.
It is incredible. You know, thinking about the Holocaust and why is all this darkness happening in the world? We were talking about this earlier. Gabor Mate had on this gentleman, and I think his name is Michael Hubel. I will put it in the description. He actually spoke about doing Holocaust integration work in workshops. And so he would have these groups of people that he would help them go through the process of healing, whether it was family members who had these just family members greatly experiencing the trauma of the Holocaust, and on either side. So he was helping them do integration work. And I think globally, what that movie, The Schindler's List, I can't even imagine how much. So there you were able to cry. Now, I don't know, maybe you had a past life that you experienced the trauma of the Holocaust, or someone that you live with had a past life that experienced the trauma of the Holocaust, even if you're not Jewish or German or a culture that was affected by that directly, as far as you know. Indirectly, we're all experiencing that, and collectively, even if it wasn't you or a family member in your house. So anytime you're looking, I mean, that made you emotional. There's something inside of you that is experiencing that deeply. And when you're crying about that, you're having a healing experience.
Right. I mean, the best way that I can describe it, I think it's just like a feeling of just absolute pure love of like doing that and saving all those people, you know, and then still regretting it so bad. Like to me, I don't know, that it's just emotional. Even right now, just thinking about it, it's just like, you know, that's one of the few movies that really affects me emotionally in a sad but positive way. You know, it makes me want to be able to do something that's so great and help so many people.
I think it's inspiring to watch movies like that. And it can bring out that advocate side of us, because really I'm not an advocate for there's a lot of things I can see a lot of different perspectives on, and I don't want to stick to a side and advocate for just this. But then there's a lot of things I do. You know, there's a lot of things that, especially in helpless situations, I think that motivates me and it does something to me. You know, if you see a helpless child or a helpless animal, or even you, I remember driving with you years ago in the car. We were driving to the chapel and there was a homeless guy digging in the trash. And I think we, I don't know, got like $40 together to give that guy. There's just like in the moment, just a quick thought, anytime, but even organizing. I was talking to this woman today at the dentist office. She's going on a missions trip to, I can't remember where she's going, somewhere in Mexico. They're building a home for women and children that have been trafficked,
Oh, that's awesome.
and they've been saved. And she was so excited, so happy to give back to people that are less fortunate or that have experienced trauma and suffering. And I thought, you know, it's so horrible that that happened, but it's kind of like, you know, also the joy of giving and helping others. You know, there's a lot of reasons I think darkness is happening in the world, but it also does open us up to the opportunity to open our hearts and give, because there's so many times where there's suffering that we can't. And then we have to recognize as soon as we can.
Right. I think that's a perfect example, what you're talking about, of the trafficking to use in this discussion right now. Because, like, what can I personally do about that sitting here in North Carolina what am I going to do? Right. But you could still send out that energy, that love and positive energy as something that you can do that is simple, and it's still going to add energy into that collective, put it out there, and hopefully eventually turn the tables where that stops or more people get freed or whatever. When we were talking about the homeless guy, I'll just say driving to the chapel twice a week, and I mean, it was like 45 minutes or something, away. And I usually never have cash on me. But on the times when I would have cash for whatever reason, I would think, all right, if I see somebody begging for money, then this money's for them. And sometimes there would be somebody, but it wasn't set up right. Like I was too many cars back in the line. I wasn't by the person at the right time, but I'd be like, if things work out where it's lined up where I can do it, then I'll give them a couple bucks or whatever I got here. And I mean, I don't know who brought this up or whatever, but sometimes people think, well, all that person's going to do with that money is go buy drugs or alcohol or whatever, or they're not even really homeless. They're just doing it like that's their job. They go out there and panhandle every Friday and they're making more money than you are actually. But from my perspective, after that money leaves my hand, like I'm done with it. From my side of it, it was giving to help somebody. And then that's it. I don't have to worry about what happens after that. Right? Like my heart was in the right place. I did something without expectation of return. And it creates so many good opportunities. Eventually, it always comes back. When you do something good, especially if you just all of a sudden have an inspiring thought to do something good and you follow through with it, like miracles happen when you do that. Like I'll give you one good example of that really quick.
Yeah.
Right. Like I was waiting for my wife to come from England so that we could get married. And I had just been laid off by my brother. I was working with him. And he gave me severance, so I was doing good. I could survive on the severance or whatever. But my wife was like, oh, you need to get a job or immigration isn't going to let me come in if you're not working, And so with my brother, I was doing computer programming, but I was like, oh, I'll never be able to get a job programming because I've only learned what he's taught me, and what I was doing was really specific for the game that he was making. And so I just didn't have a lot of confidence in myself to begin with. So I was taking like some night classes for computer. And then I got a job as a security guard at this building overnight. Right. So I would just go there at night, walk the building a couple times. In the morning, people would come in, I mean, that was it. So I was taking a couple night classes for computer programming, and I would just go in there and like write the program down on a piece of paper that we had to write for class. And then I would go home and plug it into the computer later, but I'd have it already all written. So everybody comes in the morning, right when I'm about to get off work. Okay. So like 11 to 7 in the morning or something like that. So one day I was doing my rounds at the night, and every single door in the whole building was closed, like every office. And I was like, man, this isn't right. I've never seen it like this, right? It was just unusual. I mean, every door. And people started coming in and they're like, I'm locked out of my office. I never lock my door. My key is in my desk. And so people were kind of really upset, right? Call the building manager and all this. And luckily she got it sorted out before I had to call a bunch of other people. But the lady was so angry, right? So I was just like, look, I'll tell my bosses to make sure that nobody does that again, because it was one of the security guards did that. And I'll leave a note right here. I'll make sure it never happens again. So I did all those things. The next weekend when I was working, so I think it was Sunday night, so everybody's going to be coming in on Monday, I'm walking around the building, and again, every single door is closed and locked. Okay. And I was just like, oh man, now this woman's going to come in the morning. I'm here. I told her I was going to do all this stuff. She's going to chew me out or whatever. Right. So, um, when I got off work, she hadn't come in yet. And I was like, oh, thank God she didn't come in when I was there. But I was leaving, and like all of a sudden, I just had this thought of, oh, I should go buy her a little plant and write her a note. Okay. No, I could have just ignored that altogether. Right. I could have just went on my way. I mean, I'm making a security guard. I'm not making much money, but I was like, there's a supermarket right across the street. So I went over there. I got a little plant, got a little card. I put, I'm sorry that your door's locked again. I did everything I said I was going to do. They can't follow instructions or something. I don't know. Well, the next day when she came and found me and she said, oh, my partner runs a computer programming company that do consulting. And if you want, I can get you a job working there because I saw you had a computer book sitting there. And if you want, I can get you a job and you'll learn on the job programming there. And I
Wow.
was like, okay. And I did that. And that's how I got really into computer programming and being able to, like, I became one of those top people at that company within a couple years. Then I went off and consulted on my own. Then I became an employee at a couple different places. But all of that one event is what triggered a big, huge course in, my life path. And I've had multiple things like that happen. This is just one little instance, but now that I'm old, I can look back and I see how things worked out, and it's really interesting. Anyway, so if you have an intention, if you have a thought inspired just to do something for somebody, just do it.
Yeah, because you never know what's going to come. So many people talk about like how they want to communicate with spirit and they want to have this connection and I think that's what was happening with you. You were having a guidance from a spirit guide and you decided to take it.
And that is the way that I found that it works for me. It's like the way that they work with me is they just like give me something that interests me to do. Like that's kind of how they guide me. Like all of a sudden I'll just have a thought, oh, this sounds interesting. And then I just do it. Like I don't give it a second thought or think on maybe not. I just do it. And so they know they can lead me that way.
Well, and I wonder if that woman maybe was having an experience where she was trying, and who knows, but maybe she was trying to learn to control her frustration and not take it out on people. And you might have sealed that healing or contributed in some way to that healing process for her.
Right. You never know what it caused, but it was just like I said, I had no idea that she had a partner I didn't do it for anything other than really the main thing was I don't want her to yell at me and I want her to like me. Right. I don't want her to yell at me anymore.
That's really such a great story. So much guidance. Well, when we think we can't do anything, sometimes ideas for us to change come in the most unlikely situations.
I mean, what kind of advice do you have for the darkness in the world and trying to heal it? I mean, what would your plan be if you could say this is what I think would be the most help?
I think sometimes when we view darkness, well, because my thought is the people, if there are people contributing to darkness, and we do know that that is happening because people are trafficking people, people are working to develop laws that don't support our well-being. There's a lot going on that is negative. There's greed and control and all of that happening. But I would say instead of the fight against it, because people become advocates and that's a beautiful thing, but then people fight. Anytime we say we have to fight this, I think we're in the wrong vibration. I think the vibration for really truly healing is to develop those perspectives. So I need to look at the perspective of someone that is doing these horrible deeds and try to get to a place where I can understand why they're doing them. And that is hard. And I'm not saying start with someone that's human trafficking, because that was really hard for a long time. And I still have not worked with clients that have done negative things to people. I just haven't been in a space where I've been able to take them on as clients. I remember a long time deciding, and I had a really wise mentor tell me, you have to decide if that's something you can do. And I still can't. But I have worked with plenty of people that have been abused. I tend to work with trauma a lot, trauma clients. So what I can say is, in their healing process, what needs to happen for them a lot of the time is to understand the abuser's pain and suffering that created the intolerable acts. And so I would say, individually, I know how witnessing that, and I'm not saying they're holding compassion for them or forgiving them or whatever, and sometimes they are and sometimes they aren't, but just being able to witness and see humanity from that perspective helps to bring the next step of the healing. And I would say, too, for everyone that believes in, obviously, we believe in reincarnation and past lives. We haven't always been good. And sometimes we experience suffering as a way to understand the suffering that we've caused people. I don't recall any past lives where I was an abuser, but I can recall past lives where I was abused, and I was definitely in situations where I was a lot more helpless than I've been in this lifetime. So maybe that is a clue that I have been an abuser. I have done something in a past life that's very negative. To heal that would mean that I would have to get to a place where I can hold compassion for someone that has wronged people. And maybe it's just looking at a CEO of a pharmaceutical company that's walking on the backs of people to get to the top, to have the yacht, to have the this, that, da, 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 da. Holding compassion for them and viewing their life as what they see as valuable and what they see as success and what they see as makes them look a certain way, or that is what they're striving for. And I have not done anything like that in this lifetime, but I do recall being a child and being in situations where I wanted to manipulate people's perspectives the way they looked at me to see what it felt like. So I can kind of relate. And so I think by opening up my ability to see multiple perspectives allows a pathway to open up in our collective if they ever do decide to view life from a different perspective. And we know plenty of people that have come out of those types of jobs and have had an awakening and have taken on a different job and used their money for good. And so it's happening. I think it's because people are willing to take the time to hold compassion, view them in that way. It offers the availability of that energy and vibration a lot closer to them, a lot closer to their auric field than it would if no one had done that. I really believe that wholeheartedly.
Right. If you try to take their point of, if you try to look at that person from their perspective, right? I mean, are they really happy? Probably not. A lot of people that just need more and more and more and more, and they're never satisfied, and they need to be on top, and they need to be at the best clubs and restaurants. And I mean, they spend all their time worrying about that. They don't really get a chance to actually live. And life is pretty short, right? I mean, it seems long, but it sure seems like it's getting a lot shorter for me as time goes on. Every year it comes quicker, quicker, quicker. But so what did drive them to even be in that situation in the first
A
place.
false sense of what happiness is.
And any way to get there that they can by stepping on anybody else to do it. And so you're what you normally would have somebody who was abused do is be able to kind of step outside of themselves and look at it from a perspective of non-attachment, and then be able to kind of look at it and kind of understand it without condoning those actions or anything, but see how it was possible for it to occur.
See how it was possible for it to manifest. It is being able to separate from yourself for just a moment, taking a higher perspective, viewing the victimizer as a person that how did they justify performing this action? And then you take it a step further, once you get to that place, then you take it a step further. What resources did you need in that moment that would have helped you perceive this in a way that you could understand what was happening from a different view? And that's a really tough thing. To go back into that moment is really hard a lot of times. And it's steps. Sometimes we can look for just a second. Sometimes we can just go in for a minute and say there's a reason that they did that, that comes from a lack. Maybe they were abused. Maybe they had, a whole set of circumstances could be possible. And just to look at it like that for a while and then step away. Eventually something kicks in and the seed gets planted, and they eventually learn to get above the situation. And then they learn to see it for everything that it was. Eventually, a lot of people don't have regret for the experience because it brought them to a place of, like, I've had really horrible I've experienced a lot of trauma when I was really little. And I never thought I'd be able to say, I'm grateful for that experience. But what that experience, I think this can happen on a collective. I think this can happen collectively. What that experience did for me was it at the time it separated me from my body. And I would have these visions of being in the space above my body, floating, and I could see my body. So it taught me very young how to travel outside of my body. I had to start to view that as well. People try to do that their whole life. I know how to do that. I did have to learn how to get back into my body fully through exercise and stretching and different practices in my life to feel my body. That's still a process that I work on all the time. But eventually I got to a point of where I could help people so much and so deeply, and their lives would completely transform, that I thought I wouldn't be able to do this had I not had those experiences. And I have to say that I'm just so grateful for everything that gave me, and the abilities that it gave me, and how I view my children, and the conversations that we can have about our own family healing, ancestral healing, because of those experiences. So as horrible as they were, I don't regret them. And I think as a culture, we have that ability, as horrible as things are, to not hate the people doing these things, but to just hold compassion, even if it's just for a second. Eventually that ability grows. We can hold compassion longer. We can see it from a different perspective longer. And eventually that seed grows. And then once it hits our heart, it gets bigger and bigger. And I think that's when it starts to diminish, because if enough people are holding compassion towards someone that's victimizing people, masses of people, it becomes an opportunity for them to see it from a healed perspective too. And their spirit guides will get them.
See, so from everything that you've been saying, it really is compassion is the key to being able to heal the planet, because it comes down to being able to have compassion for even evil people and being able to see it like that and open up compassion to be able to let that loving energy be able to manifest worldwide in the universe instead of taking an angry side and pushing anger into the universe.
I don't want to push anger into the universe. There is a feeling, though, that I do have that people that have done wrong to people, I mean, karma works itself out, but sometimes awareness of wrongdoing helps, I think, the consciousness of people to say this is unacceptable. So, like we've talked before about how I have been a part of some advocacy for women that have been sexually abused. And I would always give a voice to them if I have the opportunity to do that. I feel very passionate about that. That's probably the one area where I feel the most passionate about. If I could contribute some way, I give money to Tim Tebow's charity. I definitely have the desire to help people in all ways, but that way is definitely, I'm very passionate about that. So I do want people that have done criminal acts to men or women to suffer consequences that are fair to their state or however that comes to be. I'm not saying that shouldn't happen, but I think for us as individuals, a way for us to support the people that have been abused and the people that have been the abusers, I think that that is holding compassion, because even someone that has abused someone, at some point, I would like to think, I don't work with this population, so I don't know, but I have actually seen an interview that Oprah did many years ago, and there were 6 men that had sexually abused people in their community, young, old. It was a very wide variety of diversity. And they did have remorse after they had had consequences. And I do remember one of the people saying, "I'm so grateful that I got caught."
And it wasn't just remorse for being caught, it was actual true remorse.
Yes, that one particular man, yes, he had sexually abused his cousin for many years. And he went and said sorry to her. And he felt even worse that she said it's okay. And he wanted her to be mad still. And he didn't want to take her forgiveness. And I think he had been in jail for a few years.
There's one thing too, like abuse causes more abusers, right? And violence causes more violence in this. But I will say it is possible to break the chain.
Oh, yeah, I'm living proof.
Me too. So it's possible to break the chain and just say, you know, this isn't going to happen with me. I'm not going to act this way because I don't want to have anyone experience anything that I've experienced. I don't want other people to go through this.
I wonder how the chain gets broken, because I didn't have to. I've had I've experienced a lot of trauma. I didn't have to say, okay, I'm going to break the chain. It was just never an option. So I just wonder if somewhere inside of us, compassion is built. And maybe it was, my parents or someone else that helped me develop the compassion in some way that they were unaware of, because I don't remember that being verbal or whatever. But I just wonder if somehow I developed compassion for the abuser, and then it just never became an option for me. And I worry about kids that have experienced a lot of abuse Because sometimes it's like you can see it working with children, you can see them starting to take on the characteristics or the temperament of their father. So then you start to worry that it's getting passed on. And what can you do to kind of break that chain in the cycle before it could manifest into them becoming abusers? And it's always compassion.
For me, it kind of was a bit different because I could see the chain. Because I know, my dad's dad, I know that he was an alcoholic and abusive, and then my dad didn't drink, but as a kid, I thought that he was really mean as anything. So it made me think back, well, his dad was mean to him, how he's treating me is probably nothing compared to what he went through because he sees himself as a good guy. And he was a good guy, but to me as a kid, it seemed like he was way super mean. But I saw the chain and I was like, well, I could be. I hope that don't think that I'm super nice and that I'm mean. And so I did consciously put that thought in there that I'm going to break it.
I did that with picking a spouse consciously. I didn't want to pick someone like my dad because my dad was really mean too. You said at the very beginning, we've had this cycle of wars and we've found ourselves with history repeating itself. And I think as a culture, we have to stop fighting one another and saying, you need to look at life this way and you need to view life this way. And these are the choices that you need to make. And not everybody can make those choices because they've had all of these life experiences that have led them to where they are right now. And no one has the right to tell them that that's wrong. It's not okay to tell someone that their perspective is wrong. It's perfect right where they are. Now they might have some healing they need to do. That perspective might change, but we just kind of have to wait until they're ready. No one can tell anybody it's time for you to heal this right now. I mean, that's just absurd. So yeah, we're definitely at a pivotal moment with the consciousness that people have been reaching, because I think the awareness of healing and our potential to heal is growing massively. I mean, we are awakening.
But I feel the same way. Like just things are opening up, like the opportunity to heals comes in a lot more. I'm being reminded of things that I had totally forgotten about, all those things.
Oh yeah, memories pop up. I do want to say this about memories that pop up. Like sometimes we have these memories pop up and we think, like there's been a lot of people over the years that'll say, I feel like something happened to me when I was little, but I just can't remember it. And I always say, just if it's not coming up and popping its head, don't go looking for it. You might not need to remember it. But you just kind of have to wait. That's just part of what's happening. But eventually, if it keeps coming and coming and coming, at some point you're recognizing that it's there and it wants to be healed. And I have to say, some sensations that come along with that people run from, it's gross. It is like the grossest feeling ever. It's so easy to say, ugh, just tuck it back in. But once you look at the grossness, you might just look at it for a minute and go, oh my gosh, that's so gross and horrible. And it gives you all the feelings that you don't want to ever have. But then you can kind of put it away for a minute, maybe write it down so it's outside of your thoughts and outside of your body, and put it in an envelope and put it with something that is healing, like a crystal. When you need to visit it again, ask the crystal to speak to you, not the memory. Then go back and look at it again. Hold space for it a little bit longer. If you could only sit with it for 1 minute the first time, sit with it for 2 minutes the second time. Spend some time with it until you can finally look at it and accept that it happened and figure out what to do next. And then, you'll be guided to someone that can help you or something that will move that energy for you. But always know the reason why it's coming is because it's in the way of something that you want.
It's time to actually put the energy in towards healing it.
Right. Like people keep saying, well, I just want peace and love. And do you? Are you sure? Because do you want what comes along with having that?
Right, to get there, you have to go through all those things. Those things are interfering with the way your mind thinks in some way or another. That's preventing you from getting to where you need to go. So you have to overcome those hurdles.
I agree. I agree. Well, it's been a really great topic. I'm really glad that we talked about it. I feel like this is a very helpful situation. So anybody watching, please put something in the comments. Let us know if you've had different experiences or if you can relate to this at all. If you have anything to share, we would love to hear it. So don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks, Scott, for meeting with me again. I always love talking to you, and I always love where our conversation goes. So thank you. All right. See y'all later. Bye.